What's up, Guardians? Just last week I posted a video on one of the best Mythic Warlock builds to be running in those Mythic activities, and this was pretty much just the getaway artist sort of stasis turret / Arc Soul build that all of us Warlock fans know of and has been around since the final shape. However, there was plenty of people in the comments saying that there is a better build and there's a better way to make this build better, and that is by swapping out the getaway artist for the Rhymecoat Raiments exotic Warlock chest piece. Now, I will admit, at the start, reading some of these comments, I was a little bit confused and I wasn't sure exactly how this exotic would make this build better, but after some decent gameplay over the past few days, I feel like I've definitely tested out many builds that work around the Rhymecoat Raiments, and I've definitely perfected the build to the point where I can safely say that the commenters were right, and the Rhymecoat Raiments exotic Warlock chest piece is a far better build than the previously posted Arc Soul getaway artist build that I posted. So without further ado, this video today is going to be running over the Rhymecoat Raiments Warlock exotic chest piece and how this is the new best build for Warlocks in the current sandbox, especially for those difficult mythic missions and also pushing into those Grandmaster conquests and anything above that 300 to 400 power light level where the activities are actually quite difficult. So let's stop yapping and let's get straight into this build. Now, obviously, this Warlock build revolves around the exotic chest piece, Rhymecoat Raiment. The armor perk reads, your Bleak Watcher turrets are enhanced with extended range and are surrounded by stasis crystals and a storm. While standing in the storm, you are granted icicles over time. Icicles activate when you fire your weapons, applying slow to targets they hit. So, to put it simple, this exotic chest piece will allow you as a Warlock to turn any of your grenades into a Bleak Watcher turret, if you have the Bleak Watcher aspect equipped. You no longer need to run a Cold Snap grenade or whatever it is. As long as you have the Bleak Watcher turret aspect equipped and this exotic chest piece, any of your grenades will turn straight away into a Frost turret, and it will also be enhanced due to the exotic chest piece. So as you can see here, just by me throwing this Bleak Watcher down in the shooting range here, it will instantly turn into an enhanced turret, but it will also spawn 4 crystals around it, and there'll also be a rift sort of storm in the middle. So as the exotic explained, if you stand in this storm, every shot that you fire with your gun, it will shoot an icicle with that bullet and add more damage to your rotation. On top of this, all 4 of these crystals around the stasis turret will also respawn after 15 seconds, so make sure when you do throw your grenade, you are using these crystals for damage, and then they will then respawn in 15 seconds for you to do even more damage. So the main goal of this build is pretty much just by throwing out your grenade, using this storm for extra damage, spawning crystals, and spawning stasis turrets everywhere to basically just crowd control the entire map. Everything you see is going to be either slowed or frozen, and you're then going to be shattering all these enemies for massive damage, and using all of your abilities in between, and also getting massive ability energy back to continue of spamming out these freezing turrets. Now, the second exotic that we're going to be running with this build is the Scout Rifle Wicked Implement, which if you haven't got, with the new sandbox, I'm not entirely sure how you go ahead and get the Wicked Implement, but if you do have it, this is the perfect weapon to use with this build, because it is a stasis scout rifle that can obviously freeze targets. Now, if you don't have this exotic scout rifle, I would recommend any other stasis primary weapon, as stasis weapons are really going to enhance this build, purely because of some factors that we're going to get into in just a little bit. Now, the Wicked Implement wasn't so good, however, it did recently get a slight buff, and it also got a catalyst, and it also is a featured exotic this season, so it's doing just a little bit more damage than what it usually would, and the catalyst is very, very important in making this build work even better. What the catalyst does is it will spawn a stasis crystal once you get a precision final blow. It's basically just giving the weapon headstone, and as this build revolves around shattering crystals, dealing damage, and freezing targets, this is the perfect weapon for it. And not to mention, just to quickly get into one of the artifact perks we will be running is Fever and Chill, and this states rapid precision hits with stasis weapons grant frost armor. Now, with the Wicked Implement being a rapid fire scout rifle, it is perfect for this artifact perk. You know, rapid fire, so it shoots really quick. It's a scout rifle, so it makes it extremely easy to hit headshots. So you're going to be constantly building up those frost armor stacks. And as you can see on the footage here, all it takes is 5 precision hits for 1 stack of frost armor. So with the Wicked Implement having a 20 round magazine, theoretically, if you could hit every headshot, you will be getting up to 4 stacks of frost armor just from 1 magazine of a Wicked Implement, which is almost a 20% damage resistance, just amazing for general ad control and play. You know, you're constantly getting headshots with your scout rifle from afar, and it's giving you frost armor. It's just two awesome perks here combined together, which makes the Wicked Implement very, very useful. Not to mention, this weapon also has intrinsic overload, so if you ever do some sort of conquest or grandmaster, it's a great weapon to use here to stun your overload champions. And obviously, being a stasis weapon, it's going to apply slow every single bullet, and eventually, after enough bullets, it will then freeze the target, just adding for more frozen crowd control in your gameplay loop. Now, to further this build and make it even better than what it is, let's jump over into the Prismatic Warlock subclass and run over some of the aspects, abilities, and fragments. So as for your abilities, Healing Rift is very vital here. You want to be running also Arcane Needle for 3 chances to proc Devour, and also to unravel targets and spawn tangles for whenever you need some extra damage. As for the grenade here, like I said earlier, you can run any grenade that you want to be able to spawn a Bleak Watcher turret. However, the Healing Grenade has the shortest cooldown out of all of these grenades, meaning that we can get our Bleak Watcher turret out twice as fast. And not to mention, having a healing grenade whenever you need is very, very important, especially in these mythic contents. So run a healing grenade for the increased duration of your Bleak Watcher turrets. As for the aspect, obviously Bleak Watcher and Feed the Void, just the two best aspects on the Warlock subclass here. Feed the Void granted you Devour, and Bleak Watcher obviously for the core build. Jumping down to fragments here, in the first fragment slot I like to run Facet of Ruin. This will increase the size and damage of our stasis shatters. So whenever we break a stasis crystal, or if we break a frozen target, it's going to increase the size and the damage of all of these shatters, just making the build do more damage, and it is very, very important. Jumping over into our next fragment, we have Facet of Protection. This will just give you a flat damage resistance whenever we are surrounded, and let's be honest, in these mythic contents, a little bit of extra DR is very, very important. However, if you're feeling like you don't need to run Facet of Protection, you can sub this out for a different fragment if you wish. However, like I said, these mythic content aren't a joke. You take a lot of damage, so it's worth running. In the third slot, Facet of Hope here is very important. Since this build doesn't really revolve around a lot of healing like our previous build does, we are going to need to be spamming out our Healing Rift whenever we can as our main source of healing outside of Devour. Facet of Hope reads, whenever you have a elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. Now, an elemental buff is any buff in the game, and luckily Frost Armor counts as an elemental buff, so this will quickly regenerate our Rift, meaning we can spam out healing Rifts wherever we are on the battlefield. And our last fragment is the Facet of Devotion, which reads, defeating targets affected with stasis or strand debuffs grant bonus light transcendence energy. Now, because this build heavily revolves around freezing and shattering darkness or stasis debuff targets, we're going to be building a lot of darkness transcendence, but we won't be getting a lot of light transcendence energy. So this is our main way of getting that light side of our Transcendence bar built as quickly as possible. However, another way to do this is by putting on some sort of Void, Solar, or Arc LMG, and this will heavily impact and create that light Transcendence for us. Now moving on to our artifact perks, there are 3 main artifact perks that you want to have to make this build even better. Now the first one, which I mentioned earlier, is Fever and Chill. And basically, rapid precision hits with stasis weapons will grant us Frost Armor. So like I said earlier, running the Wicked Implement is just a free way to get Frost Armor, giving us extra damage resistance. Definitely be putting on Fever and Chill artifact perk. Now the second one is Frigid Glare, which is in the last column, which states, while Frost Armor is active, stasis precision final blows cause combatants to release a freezing burst. So this is very important. Since we're pretty much going to have Frost Armor 24/7, anytime we kill anything with our Wicked Implement and it's a precision final blow, this enemy is going to explode in a massive freezing burst, which will freeze any other enemies around them. Again, just adding more crowd control and more shatters. Very, very important artifact. And the final one is Shield Crush, which states, while you have Woven Mail or Frost Armor, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. So again, we have Frost Armor permanently, so all of our Arcane Needles will recharge quickly, allowing us to get, Devour procced more often, and they'll also increase damage, so it just makes it even easier to get that Devour procced. So these 3 artifact perks are a must-have for this build. Definitely get those on if you haven't, or if you haven't unlocked them yet, definitely lock in and get them. And moving on to our last factor of this build, and that is our stat priority, since this is very, very important now in Destiny 2. So our first priority is Grenade. You want to have this at 100. There is no point in going over 100, because when you boost your Grenade fact over 100, all it does is increase the damage of our grenades. However, in this build, we're not doing damage with our grenades, so get it to 100 for the minimum cooldown of 42 seconds. This is very important. Our second stat priority would be weapons. Get your weapons to as high as you possibly can, as long as you have 100 grenades. You know, in above that 150 is very, very good. And then once you've maxed out that, just put the rest of your stats into your class and melee stat. However, focus on grenade and weapons first, and then jump into class ability. But that pretty much rounds out the build there. The rotation is very simple. You can play this defensively or offensively. You know, you could play offensively by throwing your stasis turret at the enemies, and then using the crystals to shatter and cause damage. Or you can play defensively by spawning the crystals and the stasis turret on you, standing in the storm, and, you know, using the crystals for defense in your rift. But overall, this build has been extremely solid, and I've been destroying all of these mythic missions solo all by myself. So make sure you definitely try out this build. There'll be a dim link down below in the description. But again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.